Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite dark sorcerer this morning, 11:10 a.m. where I am. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about secret societies. And I find it interesting because of the fact that there have been numerous secret societies throughout the world, and mostly in the old world, but there are a couple that are right here in the United States, such as the Skull and Bone, which numerous presidents have been associated with. And a lot of people don't really know much about them outside of their symbol, the skull with the crossbones. This is also associated with occult studies. Now, this is not what I'm going to talk about. Today, I'm going to talk about the Hashshashin. I'm going to talk about the Knights of Templar. I'm going to talk about the dark shamanism and kind of just fill you in on some stuff that I've learned through my own personal studies of these cultures. Okay. First of all, let's talk Illuminati. Okay. We all know that there's a lot of these Illuminati wannabes out there scamming people, you know, saying, well, if you put forth this such and such amount of money, then you will end up with riches, fame, and fortune. Okay. A lot of these groups are from like Africa or right here in the US, European countries, even, and they have nothing to do with the actual Illuminati from the 15th to the 17th century. If people actually did their homework on the Illuminati was a secret society that was associated with the Vatican. Okay. The Vatican did not like this group, and this is why. The Vatican, those Catholics, those the Roman Catholics, the mainstream Catholicism, they didn't like this group because it, they're they weren't based off faith. They weren't based off the doctrines that were associated with their organization. Instead, the mainstream system sought to destroy this group, and they eventually did around the sometime between the 16th and 17th century. But it was interesting because the Illuminati, which made up of about 25% of the actual Vatican members, they based their system off science, alchemy, occult studies. It was based off actual, how should I say this? Not atheistic and not theistic, but more in between. They sought spiritual, but proof, but they also sought after physical proof, meaning scientific, what they could prove, that scientific advancement. Some say they still exist within the Vatican today. That I cannot confirm or deny. I cannot confirm that aspect because I'm not a Catholic. I don't associate with my enemies. But what I can tell you about this group is they were very, very good at what they did. Now, like I said, this group existed between the 15th and the 17th century. Now, the Hashshashin was a group that originated out of Giza, you know, um, Egypt, even out of Africa, okay, northeastern Africa. And this group basically was the Shem priesthood. Each member of the priesthood had a different classification, a different level of initiation, if you wish. This group basically, you had different classes of monks or priests. that had different responsibilities. You had one class that was responsible for dealing with the public. Okay. You had another class that was responsible for maintaining the altar room, the temple itself. You had another one that was built, their sole duty was to pray, to worship, and to maintain that spiritual connection with dietas. Okay, that's dietas is the term for those of you who do not know for gods. Okay, that they worship. And for those of you who don't know, Anubis was the god of death. He was the god of the underworld. He's the jackal-headed dog. Okay, in Egyptian and African culture. So he's also known as the embalmer, the gatekeeper, the grave, the protector of the grave, and such like that. So he was very pivotal within this stage because the Shem priests that were doing all the embalming, they dealt with the dead, they dealt with all the ceremonies and the rituals. They utilized what was known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. They were the ones that kept the secrets. They kept the chants. They did the organ removals of the four main organs. They did the mummification and the cleansing process, and sometimes they were literally run out of town. Okay, so some of these priests ended up going northbound, and they went through Saudi Arabia up into the Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the Middle East, basically. And around Pakistan, an order was founded, and the year 10, what was it, 1085, I think it was, and lasted until 1275. That's 300 years of this one group, the Hashshashin, that was founded and by one of these Shem priests that had been run out of town. He founded this organization that became known as some of the greatest assassins ever known. Their tool was an athame. Okay. And it was said that they were surrounded and enshrouded in black magic because of the fact that they appeared just as quickly as they disappeared. But these soldiers, these assassins were holy monks. They were holy monks, but they were highly trained in combat. Right up until they were defeated by the Mongols. Okay. The how should I say this? The Knights of Templar was another faction, 600 to the end of the Third Crusade. They were the protectors of the people. They were holy monks, but they were highly trained in combat. These groups did not answer to anyone, no country, no faction. They just answered solely to the church. Okay. So you see, these groups really did exist out there, but like so many, they were eliminated. Okay. I still have to go in as well. All right. But they can come up to the car. All right. Yeah, you can keep him here while you do that. All right. Yeah, I already. Just let me know. It'll be a couple hours. Okay. So in a couple hours. All right. So sorry about that. My better half was we're dealing with our 4-year-old who's not feeling too good. So we're trying to decide how to go about it. So, anyways, as I was saying, they were holy monks. They were highly trained in combat, and they were literally shut down by the kings. They answered to nobody. So basically, like so many others, they were shut down, they were destroyed, they were eliminated. It became illegal to be a part of these groups. So eventually we also get into what is known as the dark shamanism. Okay. But before I get into dark shamanism, I just want to make one thing clear about the Knights of Templar. Some say that these knights became a mystical order, the Golden Dawn, or that of a much greater force that had been known between the old world and the new, the Masons. Who knows? One thing was certain is that they were let go by the Vatican. They became too rich, too popular, and like so many others that become a threat to society, they get eliminated. So, moving on, let's go into the dark shamanism. You can even Google this stuff if you wish to. So, dark or black shamanism, you're going to find the same thing. Now, here we see where the dark shamanism is associated with Genghis Khan. The dark shamanism stood against what was known as yellow shamanism. Okay, and again, you're seeing the composition of the forces combating each other between light and dark. Okay, this is why so many today pick that gray area so they can practice both. Okay, those of you into the Star Wars franchise, look at the gray Jedi. Okay, not the Sith, not the Jedi Order, but the gray Jedi's. Same exact technique, just different. Okay. Now, personally, I don't condone that false bullshit. But when you get into actual sorcery and actual magic, actual practices of religious um, worship, servitude, whatever you want to call it, okay. And I've done videos on each wording so that you can actually go back and see. But it comes down to your preference and what you practice. Okay, because you got in Voodoo, you have a different meaning to being a servant of the Loa and of the ancestors. You have, the servants of demons or demonolatries, demonolators, stuff like that. So you are not only an apprentice of theirs, but you are a servant. You worship them. You work with them. You make deals with them, pacts and such. But the dark shamanism was something more unique, I think. And just from based off my own studies, my own practices in this field. And I do have a lot of friends, a few friends in shamanism. And you tend to see things in a more awakening process when you delve into the history of this. These dark shamans were known as the Dark Hat. Okay, and it was founded and run by Genghis Khan himself. And it was very interesting to see because he was known as the protector of the people. He literally was like the home guard for his country. Okay. Some stories and myths is that he controlled most, about half of the, or if not three-fourths of the known world at the time. Others believe that he was a drug dealer or a drug addict, a warlord, you name it. But there was an old saying, and I want to read this to you. I actually posted this on Facebook. I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed such sins, then God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you. Genghis Khan. Okay. And this was basically due to the political stance. Okay. You look at his history and what the Dark had accomplished. They weren't just the protectors of the people. They didn't just represent the home guard and perform the interests of the state. They were the spiritual advisors. They were the ones that walked amongst nature and of the spiritual realm. They utilized many different tools, which was fascinating in the research itself. And I'm not going to get into it because there's just too much to get into. But like the Hashshashin, they were wiped out by the Mongolia. Ironic how two of these stories, the Hashshashin and the Dark Shamans, were wiped out by the Mongols. Nobody else could defeat these two groups, but yet the Mongols did. It took many men and many years, but guess what? They defeated them. Okay. Very, very interesting. So, if you think about history, we've seen even more secret societies popping up since then. You had the Order of the Nine Angles. Lately, a lot of people have been having a lot of issues with the ONA, stating, "Oh, it's devil worship. Oh, it's they incite terror by, say, for an example, mass murder or whatever, making blood pacts." This was associated with that whole BBC News bullshit, and that was associated with co-wedding and how to become a living god. But we also see where other organizations have popped up. You have the Brotherhood of Satan, you have the Satanic Brotherhood. You know, the Brotherhood of Satan started out in Virginia. Well, technically North Carolina, but their main office was founded in Virginia, and they also have one in San Francisco. So, but for the most part, they reside in, I guess you could say, a quarter of the way into the country from the Eastern Seaboard. And it's funny because I was talking with a friend about this group, and he and his superior were completely surprised because this is a secret organization. And if one is able to just pay attention to details, certain phrases, and read in between the lines, you can literally find out as much information as possible that will blow your opponent's mind away. And that's basically what happened. So, um, but yeah, you've also got groups popping up that are known as houses within Palo Mayambi. You've got voodoo um, traditions that have been popping up throughout the U.S., South America, throughout the African Caribbean traditions. And a lot of them will say you cannot practice because you're not black or you're not Hispanic, you're not initiated. Well, if you've actually studied the material, then you would know that the Loa or the Orisha reach out to you. That's number one. Number two, obviously, you don't know the flip side of being initiated and being uninitiated, getting into the field. The Bokor or Caplata, the female Bokor, for an example, they can easily become a Hungan and a Mambo. Okay, just as easily as the Mambo and Hungan can become a Bokor or a Caplata. And then you have and Palo, in the Palo Mayambi Santeria traditions, you have the same thing, the houses, where the uninitiated can become known as the Marimberos. Okay, I haven't quite found the female variation of that yet, but I'm pretty sure that as it stands right now, for the past 10 years that I've been studying Palo Mayambi and recently got into Palo Monte as of a few months back, both are classified under Marimberos. Now, these houses stand for particular rules, different associations, different practices, but they're there. Okay, even if you get into Bulgaria, you're going to see the Brua, who is a female practitioner of this tradition. She, and then you have the Bruo, which is somebody who basically runs a botanica, and well, actually, both of them run botanicas, but the Bruo is basically the one that people go to for black magic, sorcery, and basically vengeance, if you wish, justice. but yet you have to hunt them down. You have to know where to go and who actually practices. For that, you have to know the signs. You have to know what you're doing. But like I said, these secret societies are there. And there's an old expression: Rome was not built in a day, but it did fall to the hordes in a single day. So, when you do your homework, when you delve into any given system and you trace it back to the old world, I'm not talking the old world known by pagans and Wiccans. No, I'm talking folklore. I'm talking old school magic. Okay, Magia Negro or Negra. I'm talking the old school systems, the Hexa, the Eshi, the Aji, the Strega, the Necromancer, the Shaman. You get into these traditions and you trace them back, you will be surprised just how deep the gnosis goes. And who knows, maybe you'll take something out of it. Maybe a lot of stuff that will help you along your own personal journey into magic, into sorcery, depending on the tradition that you're in. All right. So, with that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I hope you delve into those mythology of these groups. I hope that you get into the physical practices of what they practice, and just see where it leads you. Look at the history, the mythology, the folklore. You know, hell, get into the old scriptures. The old books. I mean, one of the biggest, well-known ones in Africa is known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Book of Thoth, the Green Emerald, for an example. Okay, these are some of the biggest ones right there in Egypt. Giza. Okay, the how should I say this? The Egyptian pantheon. Okay, that you can delve into. Okay, when you get up into Germanic and European traditions, look at the Edda, for an example. Get into the old grimoires. Okay, like I said, you have the Hexa, Haxa. You have the Strega, the Necromancer, the Wizard. Look at the titles, going all the way down into Africa, getting into the Bokor, the Caplata, the Hangan, the Maramberos, the Polero. Okay, get into the Necromancer. You'd be surprised just how deep the resources of from Egypt all the way up into European countries as far up as Russia. Okay, goes just within necromancy. A lot of people don't leave the Greek or Roman systems. Trust me when I tell you that when you delve into them, your mind's going to be blown. I wrote an entire essay of over 4,000 words, and that didn't even cover you know, more than 25% of just the study that I did that took up to a year of study just on necromancy. Okay, going all the way up into through Germany, Germanic systems, Slavic, Baltic, Slovakian, you know, and now I'm getting into Hungarian and Saudi Arabian traditions of necromancy and practices. Trust me when I tell you that there's so much out there. What you're dealing with is 1%. Okay. So when you get serious about your practice and you delve into these systems and you literally do a full on, you know, belly flop into these systems, you'll be surprised at what you can accomplish, especially where you're going to look and what topics to get into. Okay. And Gabriel Fisher, Egio Satanis, my friend. It's good to see you on the channel. So yeah. So like I said, get into these systems and you'll be surprised. The Shem priesthood is spelled Sem priesthood. Okay. A lot of times people will make the mistake of going, okay, the term Shem, that must be SH. S-E-M. Nutso. It's S-E-M. Okay? Really get into that. Hey, dude, what's going on? So, like I said, delve into is that a role-playing game or a video game series? I don't do the only one that I've ever done that I actually enjoyed was called the Star Game, and it's based off chess, modern day chess game, but with planetary applications. Okay, if you take the different spheres from astrology and planetary systems, you can actually switch out the chess pieces for alchemical symbols. It is a way to challenge your mind and to access the higher cognitive abilities. So, hey, welcome, Gabriel. So that's the only one I do, but outside of that, I am aware of D&D. That one I have come across that on YouTube through some of my studyings. Some reason that's one of the more modern day practices. I'm not really sure what it is or what it entails. It looks almost anime to me in some cases. Other people just talk about it, but I don't really get into it. I don't even know much about it. So, ah, I see. Well, if you want to get into death dealers, look at the Sith. The Sith are also known as the Sadi, depending if you're going from the Scottish or the Irish tradition. Get into the vampire, the ghoul, the zombie. Okay, the zombie is associated with Haitian Voodoo. The ghoul is basically a flesh eater and a blood drinker. You have through European traditions. You also have the wraith, the revenant. You have a lot of different aspects. You can even go into the elven because if you look into the Edda, for an example, you have what is known as the white elves, which were sparkly, good for humanity. They were knowledgeable, and they literally sparkled a lot. They're considered celestials. Then you have the dark elves, which were more associated with demons. You know, the Coco Daemon in Greek mythology, or the Hobbit in European, okay, mythology. Now, the Wraith, that is something unique. The Revenant is also something very unique that I would recommend getting into. You can even get into the Black Dog, the Hellhound. A lot of people know them as Hellhounds today. But if you get into the history and the folklore, you'll notice that they range from England all the way through Europe. And it's not just there. People have seen them all over the world. I believe it was out in was it Michigan, Montana area. There was a farmer who had crops of corn, and the wilderness went dead silent, and he stepped down. He saw these red glowing eyes in the darkness coming from the cornfield. This was on what was that show there? It was one of those mythology type paranormal. I want to say it was like Paranormal Activity, Paranormal Witness, or something like that. They did a lot of different contact with people throughout the world, one of which actually took place about 45 minutes to an hour away from here, from where I'm currently at, which was called Gouldsboro. Okay, you know, and it's very interesting because of the fact that it was a family that came across a werewolf-like clan, and it was only because it was a warning to that family because the family ended up getting into their burrow. Okay, so they had a massive one night stand of terror, and it was reported. So, and it's very interesting to get into these mythologies, and it's the same thing when you get into the different traditions. Necromancers are known to be able to rejuvenate the dead. They are known to conjure the dead, but they can do so much more. They can operate different entities and different spiritual beings. Okay, necromancy is perhaps one of the most eldest systems of magic out there that predates shamanism. Now, shamanism and necromancy does resemble common things, tools, and practices. It is only the methods that separate them. Okay. 9 times out of 10, the necromancer ends up alone, solitary, an outcast. The mythos of vampirism in Europe is actually quite interesting. If you get into Romanian beliefs, it was said that Vlad the Impaler had been killed like 2 or 3 times in his lifetime. He'd been in prison like like 4 or 5 times for up to like 10, 15 years or so. And each time he came out 10 times more vindictive when it came to torturing his enemies. But he basically became known as the first vampire um, throughout that region. And it was said he was unkillable because he made a pact with the devil. His house actually meant House of the Dragon, but that became known as the House of the of the demon, the devil. If you get into the Red Book of Appin, for an example, Vlad the Impaler was associated with Moloch, Beelzebub. What was his name? Astaroth, Nabil. What's his name there? Samiel, Lilith, Leviathan, and I'm trying to think of that one other demon there. Luckily, I have books all laying around over here because I've been studying so much. Let me just do this real fast here. I can get in here. Nibiros. That was the one. And yeah, it was Nibiros. Yeah, Nibiros. That was the one I was thinking of. Nibiros. It was Samuel, Lilith, Nibiros, and Astaroth. Those were the four main princes, according to the Red Book of Appin. Outside of that, they prayed and worshipped and called upon Moloch, Beelzebub, and Vaul, also known as Valak. So it's a very good system on that one, and that was actually associated with Scribe, who walked and associated with Vlad the Tempesh, also known as Dracula today. Okay, so but outside of that, the folklore of vampirism in Europe what resulted in animals being walked through freshly dug graves. If a horse or a cat would or any kind of animal would not jump over a grave or walk over a grave, then that person that was in that grave was classified as a vampire and staked immediately. So there's a lot of different stories and a lot of different mythos of vampirism throughout Europe. So you just have to go by the region and the mythos surrounding it. Witch doctors, also known as medicine men, another title given to healers, much like that of Native American or indigenous peoples throughout the world. Um, some people believe it is a title that is earned, such as a warlock, a witch, a priest, priestess, necromancer, and shaman, etc. Very, very good. So, and then you take the Shem priests for an example. The Shem priests were classified as necromancers because they were able to mummify. They worked with the dead. They worked with Anubis. They not only cleansed the body of the vessel, but they performed the rites and the rituals from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You had one that was cleansing, one removing the four main organs and placing themselves into four separate jars. And you had the autopsy, if you wish, of how they used what we call the sphere of, how should I say this, the what do they call that, the fish hook, where they'd shove it up the nose, puncturing the brain, swirl it around, and pull your brain right out through your nostrils. It's a gruesome, vision. It is, but it's very awesome to actually realize that's how they removed your brain. They didn't cut into the skull like they do today in autopsies. They made a small incision, probably about 4 inches in diameter, to remove the four main organs. They had another person cleansing from the feet up. So by the time they got up to the nose, they'd already cleansed and washed down the body from the feet up to the neck. And you had somebody else sitting there mummifying from the feet up. The head was always last. But it's very interesting to see the method. If you get into the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you're actually seeing the study of the dead, and dying, the sick, the soul's journey from the time you're born and into this world to the time you are expelled right out into the abyss, the expanse, into the universe. Very, very fascinating practices. And yes, I do get a little excited on that because I love, the study and the practices of these things. If you think thanatology, necrology, or necrophagia, for an example, even in some third world countries, you even have cannibalism. I mean, even cannibalism is legal here in the U.S., but yet everything else is dealing with corpses are illegal unless you have a license to practice medicine. You look at the overall necromantic practices of the Shem priesthood compared to today. Where do you think the medical profession today got their practices from? You go back in history 300 years, and you're going to see everything from, say, for an example, electrocution, the art of ice water as a form of torture to kill off certain parts of the diseased brain. Okay, to say, for an example, drug use. You take adrenaline, that kickstarts the heart, it kickstarts the entire cardiovascular system with one big voltage. You take the defibrillator for an example. Where do you think they got that from? Electrocution, right? Now you think about the different ways to create life, but also to kill and take it. Okay. Where do you think the medical profession today got that from? Go back in history and you will see their practices. You will see how they came about and why today you need a license to do it. When in the past, all you had to do was go to one of the wise men and women of the tribes or the communities, like a shaman, a necromancer, a priest or priestess who knew herbalism, who knew the various different practices. Those known in European traditions today, keepers of the secrets. Same exact thing. Every single one of the orders and the secret societies that I just mentioned here today, all of this could be traced right back. With the Shem priesthood, if you think about it, if you actually think about it, think of the knowledge of the anatomy, how to kill with such precision. Think about that for just a minute. They only use a dagger and disappear just as quickly as they appeared. Think about this for just a minute. The knowledge of the anatomy to go for, say, the jugular, go in through the side and puncture the heart, or go right between the collarbone, take out the heart with anathema, slit the throat from ear to ear. The femoral artery that's in the groin goes down your leg. Go for the kidney, for an example. Come up behind, kidney, twist. They bleed out in like 5 minutes, whereas the femoral artery, you bleed out in less than 2 seconds. The jugular, you have a couple of minutes, tops. Yeah, I've studied the anatomy too, so but you see my point. To become such proficient assassins while worshiping their own gods as holy monks, they were badass. This was a badass group. They lasted for 200 years, had 300 kills credited to them before the Mongols took them out. You think of all the wars that the Knights of Templar, all the battles that the Knights of Templar was associated with within the 600 years that they were in operation. How much pain could they endure just to defeat an enemy? The discipline, the focus, the commitment that these groups had to their cause. The Illuminati, the strength and the integrity to pull away from the Vatican to study science and an how should I say this? Not just the science, but also the spiritualism, and to find actual proof of the soul's existence. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, the study of the death and dying. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, how to remove organs and to mummify, to cleanse and purify and perform the ceremonies and the rituals. You can't tell me that these groups were just heathens. No, these were groups that were masters of their domain and they were taken out by an overwhelming force of fear because they became a threat to society. That is what history has shown. History may have been written by the victors, but if you think about it, anybody who does their own research can find the truth. This is why I don't associate with my enemies. This is why I don't associate with the JCI. As I tell my coworkers where I work, don't mistake me for the human I play, because I'm a wolf in sheep's clothing. You ask the residents where I work at a long-term living center. Yes, there's a Catholic minister there. There's another ordained minister there. Not really sure what denomination he's at, but you should see the looks that I get when I make a demonic joke. I have no issues with it. Putting you on the spot, making you look ridiculous. I have no I don't feel bad about it either. I'll sit there. A resident will look at me and say, "You're a bad boy." I said, "No, I'm just evil. I'm demonic. You are who you hang out with." So if you want to hang out with these slavehood type groups, then you're going to be led into stupidity. You'll be stupefied. And yes, I just used the term of the name of a song put forth by Disturbed, one of the greatest rock bands out there. Love that song. And what's that other song? The one that says, "Can we play another game now that I've allowed you to defeat me? Maybe this time I can win." You know what I'm saying? I forget the name of that song, but it's another one. Two of the greatest songs out there by that group. But the point is, if you're not willing to separate from the herd to go and learn for yourselves, you'll never be free. You will never become enlightened. And that's why I do these videos to show you these groups. Go look into them. Go back to your Bible. What was it? One of the greatest philosophers, a very wise man, in my opinion. And I'm going to show you. I think I got his book over here. Marcus Aurelius. His book Meditation. Okay. I've been getting into the Japanese traditions over the last couple of months. And everything from Bushido to Shintoism to Stoic. And let me see, even witchcraft, sorcery, and superstitions. Okay. And going further into it, one of the things I've noticed is that mastering the Stoic way of life, it seems like they seem to go to between three different philosophers from three different times: Zeno, Marcus Aurelius, and what was his name there? Seneca. Probably just butchered that name. It's Seneca. Basically, Neuro. Surrounding by Roman times, Greek times, even. But Marcus Aurelius was one of the many discussed, and really the author here of Stoicism really put a lot of emphasis on Marcus Aurelius's book Meditations. And I've had this book for about a year now. I've spent maybe 6, 7 years trying to find the complete book of it. And I found it very, very interesting. His life, his his thought forms, when he looks at the world, be it politics, socialism, fighting a war, vengeance, justice, to him it didn't matter who was in charge. He was prepared either way. Let nothing be done rashly and at random, but all things according to the most exact and perfect rules of art. That's page 32 underneath the second rule. Very, very good things. That's all I got to say. But his views were more philosophical. He was rationalized by everything. He was well educated, very well enlightened. And when he touched on a topic, be it death, be it life, affairs of the state, be it religious perceptions. It was one of those he was one of those guys that you just want to go back in time and meet. I would highly, highly recommend the Book of Meditations to everyone. On page 35, for an example, not through thou hadst thousands of years to live, death hangs over thee, whilst yet thou liveth, whilst thou mayest be good. Very intriguing book. Thou most comfort thyself in the expectation of thy natural dissolution, and in the meantime not grieve at the delay, but rest contented in these two things. First, that nothing shall happen unto thee which is not according to the nature of the universe. Secondly, that it is in thy power to do nothing against thy own proper God and inward spirit. For it is not in any man's power to constrain thee to transgress against him. That's page 47, and it's under X. Okay. I wanted to read that to you because I think and I strongly believe it has merit here. Today, we live in a world where if you try to teach somebody anything, there's an old expression: opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one. Okay. You get on social media these days, and people will sit there and tell you, well, that's not incorrect, or we're going to argue with you. Well, w- does their opinions have anything to do with what you're studying? Where's your God's or your spirit guiding you to? Think about that for just a minute. If you're into necromancy, then your entire world is surrounded by death, right? Spiritual conjurations, reanimation, working the sorcery surrounding what today is known as the blackest of all magic. Okay, black magic, the number one of the seven forbidden practices. Okay, according to the Roman Catholic Church. But you look at how it benefits you. You get into thanatology, you get into necrology. Necrology is the taking note of death. Think of obituaries. You know, reaching out to the public and saying, "Hey, such and such a person died. He was survived by such and such a family. This is where his funerary rite is going to take place." Stuff like that. Whereas the thanatology was the study of the or the woman's life and how it's affecting not only that person psychologically, but also dealing with the family's emotions and the community that that person represented. So, if you're looking at a rabbi, for an example, within the Jewish or Hebrew communities, you take somebody of great esteem or renowned wisdom, okay, and how they've affected the entire community. It would be like a priest or priestess within a coven of witches. Same exact thing. They played such an intricate part in that society, that coven, that it's going to not just affect the person dying, but also their family and the coven and their friends. So as a thanatologist, you're studying everything. You're taking note of everything. And your job is to be that counselor, that guide, that spiritualist within that formulation. If you look at the term, what a witch or a warlock was, a necromancer, for an example, a priest or priestess, their job is not only being a counselor, but a spiritual guide. You're the intermediary between the gods and humanity. You're the ambassador. And there's a lot of different roles that you play. And a lot of people don't know that. So a lot of times the priests and priestesses of these systems are not only feared after being called upon, but they're sometimes run out of town like the Shem priests. And we see this even today where the JCI, the Judo Christian institutions, rule the world. Basically, they have that ironclad grip on the world where they get all the interviews, they get all the good jobs, they dictate who can do what. Why? Because they have that stature there. Okay, you can't even go into a hospital, for an example, and apply to become a minister there because they have a high ranking ordained Catholic minister sitting there telling you, well, you can't do that because you haven't had such and such amount of hours doing street ministry. You haven't done this because you haven't been properly trained in the art of ministry or counseling. You'd have to go through our programs. Okay. Look back at Nicholas Remy's book of demonolatry, and you'll see that there are three classifications of witches. Those, the first one are the monks and the priests that perform magic that cannot be corrupted. The second is the white witches who use, they have to go and ask permission to use healing magic. And then you have the magia negro, you know, the black magic. Okay. And those, the third classification are those who basically tell the church to piss off. We're going to do whatever the fuck we want to do, you know? So, if you think about this and you get into this natural law, this natural thing, even in Voodoo, you see where if Bondi or Bondi, however you want to pronounce it, because I've seen it spelled a couple of different, ways within Haitian Voodoo, is if he doesn't permit it to happen, it's not going to happen. Your rites, your rituals will not go through, no matter how hard you try. So, and I always tell my clients that you have your will, my will, and the universe's will. Okay, so if the universe says "fuck you," there's really nothing you can do. So that's another thing, and it's really interesting to see just how this stuff comes into play. So when we think Marcus Aurelius and his concept of viewing historical, mythological, folkloric traditions, or even magical systems, secret societies in this case, you really have to be educated in those systems to even begin to understand and grasp what these groups really were, how they affected the changes in the world and in the regions that they operated in, how they were seen. What roles did they play? Why did they become outcasts? Why did they become such a fear to the herd mentality that they had to be extinct? Okay, these are things that you have to do on your own. So if you allow somebody else to rule the roost over what you think, then you might as well go back and bury your head in the proverbial sandbox and become a Christian, because that's all you're going to be. You're going to believe what you're told instead of learning and rising for yourself. Okay, your destiny, your individuality, your own godhood, that comes to you through your own actions, words and deeds. Whatever you preach, always back it up, and always make yourself available to the public. That's just the way it is. All right, but you got to take the your destiny by the reins and fulfill it by your own actions. That means dedicating yourself, committing yourself, and living it. All right. And with that said, I want to thank all of you for jumping on here with me. Feud, Gabriel Fisher, thanks for jumping on here and communing with me. It's appreciated. And for those of you coming on after the fact, Hope you like it. Hope you delve into these sources that I've given. And with that said, have a good day. I'm going to go back to tending to my sick 4-year old. And until next time, have a good one.